I would like to invite Andrea Miele from Colorado Children's to the stage. So Andrea is a neuropsychologist, and she is the principal investigator for the STARR site at Colorado. Sorry, I may have screwed that up.
No, I'm sure it's just fine. Good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be able to talk with you today. We're gonna, one of the things that as the study is continuing that we're now finally able to do is really try to put together a developmental roadmap for STX. And I have the start of that here. The next 2 years are going to be really important for us to continue to kind of gather additional data about milestones. But let me kind of tell you where we are, and we can go from there. Okay, so I always like to start with a thank you. Absolutely, so many thanks to all of our families who participate, our clinic nurse coordinators who are not here today, Riley, Rose, and Tristan. None of this work would be possible without our clinic research coordinators, one of whom is in the back there with me now, Megan Stringfellow, who interfaces with all of our families, does all of our scheduling, our data entry, really made kind of all these slides possible. And if you can see, we are making stars in that photo for the STARR study. We need an updated one, but we got one this year, so. And then these are the consortium sites that you've already heard about. I already apologized yesterday for not having the names for Stanford and Rush. So if you've gone to one of those sites, please know that their names will be on the slide at the next time I give this presentation. All right, so you already have heard about the study, but just to kind of level set, one of the largest things that we're trying to learn about is development in kids with in individuals with STXBP1, because we know that seizures might not be the best kind of outcome measure. So we started off for a cross-sectional kind of study where we were just looking at the data kind of this way, and then we have kind of entered into this longitudinal phase where we have kids who've had multiple visits, and we can really track their development over time. Yep. All right. I knew there was going to be a third thing, like things come in threes. So, so the parent questionnaires that you've heard about, we have kind of various outcome measures. The parent questionnaires that you guys all fill out from RareX, CBCL, ABC, QI Disability, Parent CCSA, Vineland. These are critical because they really fill in some of the parts of the study that we aren't assessing in person. So please know that we very much appreciate when those are completed. We are looking at them. The data is going to be analyzed. I know it's several hours to get through them, but please know that it's not data kind of going into a vacuum. We're actively looking at it kind of every time that we get together. Then we have the performance-based assessments, some of which you've already heard about, the GMFM, which is a gross motor measure, the Peabody, which is a fine motor measure, the CARS, which looks at kind of social skills and autism, and then the Bailey, which you've already seen a picture of. So this is the one that I do, at least the first 3 subtests. You might recognize some of the stuff. It's a lot of just play-based assessment like we've already kind of heard about. And so let me kind of tell you where we are with understanding kind of milestone development. So this talk is focused on cognitive and language because some of my other colleagues are looking at more of the motor stuff in depth. But this is data from Baylor, Colorado, Philadelphia, Stanford, and Weill Cornell. So maybe some of your data is in here. The data was, it was all data kind of obtained June 5th. So if there were visits kind of after that, they're not included in this data set. And then for this discussion, I took out visits for kids who are under 42 months old. That's because the Bailey only is intended for individuals going up to 42 months. So for those individuals, skills we know that they're still developing, so we don't want to hold kids accountable for skills that they might not be able to demonstrate yet. So those kiddos are not in this data set. But we are doing kind of a separate analysis on them, so please don't be discouraged if that is one of your children. When kids had more than one visit, I actually analyzed the most recent one. So if your kiddo had 4 visits, I kept the 4th visit in this data set. So we had 153 individuals to talk about. Hopefully you can see the demographics okay. So again, about equal males and females, mean age about 10 years old, but a wide range from 3 to almost 37 years old. To the point that was just raised, we're always looking for older individuals and more diverse kind of races and ethnicities. This is the breakdown. I think one of the things that we identified yesterday was this kind of unknown or not reported category is something that we could really, we should fix that. We can answer those questions. And so as we go forward, the first way that I kind of divided up the sample was what skills could 75% of the sample show me on the Bailey. So you can see the skill kind of on the left, the number of kids out of the 153 who were able to show that skill, and then the percent. So again, 75% or more. So we have a lot of kind of interacting with the environment, looking at objects, looking at the rattle. Shifting attention is when you kind of look here, and then you look here, and then you look here, and then you look here. So kind of coordinating your eyes to orient to sound. Being interested in the environment around, and then kind of exploring an object, maybe something that's novel that your child kind of hasn't seen before. So then I looked at the other end of the spectrum. So these are skills, and I'm sorry it's a little bit small, that less than 5% of the sample was able to show me at this data cut. And you can see that these are some pretty tough skills, some pretty advanced skills, putting together a puzzle, kind of naming a picture, a memory kind of a game, putting pegs in a pattern, classifying objects by their kind of their code. If I say 3 numbers, can your child say those numbers back to me? The 2-step action, so having 2 things in a row, grouping by size, matching by size, and counting. Now, these are skills that we're still gathering data on, so I fully expect these percentages to change over time. The other thing that these skills, I think, show us are actually an opportunity as we keep talking about clinical trial readiness. So whereas I want all of your kids to be able to show me these milestones, these items might actually be what we can compare a therapeutic to if we know they're kind of uncommon across the cohort of kids, but then suddenly so many more kids are able to demonstrate these specific items, I think we might know that a therapeutic is doing something. So it's kind of hard to read, but I think they're also, they might prove to be an opportunity for us to know that stuff that we're doing is actually working. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about these items right now. And so these are items on the receptive language domain, and this time I cut it kind of at around 50%. We've already heard that language development is particularly challenging in kids with STX, and so these are the skills that, again, about 50% could show us. So kind of responding to voices, brings object to mouth is what that's supposed to say. Banging, responding to name, which I think is an exciting milestone when families feel like that one is emerging. And then recognizing words. This is something that I always talk about in my clinical evaluations, is to try to use the same word to describe something day to day that your child is interacting with. And pretty often there's evidence of, kids know what that word means. And that's what we're able to see here. And then, so this similarly, less than 5% of the sample, so items that are harder for kids to show us, but do kind of represent this opportunity for looking at change from natural history. And again, these are pretty challenging skills. Understanding less, more, pronouns, most. And then the last domain that I'm going to talk about is expressive language. And so, again, I capped it at kind of greater than or equal to 50%. And so we know that, we hear kind of vocalizations and sounds, I think, pretty early, but then there's sometimes a little bit of a delay or kind of time period between kind of more than that. But we do eventually hear vowel sounds. And then, of course, the social interaction, so smiling and laughing. And then so for expressive language, here I have kind of the skills from between 5 and 10% of the sample. And again, this would be to kind of say it out loud. So naming pictures, 2-word utterances, combining 3 words together, being able to be understood by a stranger 75% of the time, naming colors, all kind of more advanced skills. So the other kind of point about the way that we need to think about the data that I'm presenting is, which is that we also kind of what we're able to talk about is when I was able to tell you that, or when I was able to show that your child was able to demonstrate a skill, they might have that skill might have emerged a few months before, but the data that we have is obviously like when they completed the study visit, and so there's some variability kind of inherent there. And now I do have some data on the 42 months or younger group. This one has 45 children. I want to basically kind of compare both groups. And so for this group, since it was smaller, again, only 45, I picked the median age, and a skill was kind of first, again, observed by one of the study teams. And so all of these skills were around kind of 2 years old. I picked the median because it's more kind of resilient and robust to distributions that are not normally distributed. And so this means that half of the group had the skill younger than kind of that median age column, so around 24 months, and half of the group demonstrated that skill after 24 months. So 24 is kind of in the middle of the range when this skill was kind of first emerged. And you can see it's a lot of kind of similar items that we talked about before. And then I have kind of at the other end of the spectrum, the oldest median age that was able to kind of show these skills. And so this is more around, half of the group is kind of above age 3 and half of the group is below around 3. Stirring with a spoon, everybody kind of remembers that task. Kind of solving shape puzzles, putting pegs into holes, listening to a full short story. So, what does this kind of tell us so far? From a cognitive perspective, we are absolutely able to see kind of foundational learning skills like paying attention, recognizing caregivers, kind of exploring and interacting with the environment. From a receptive language perspective, kids can understand familiar people, voices, eventually names and familiar words. And from an expressive standpoint, kids are able to smile, kind of vocalize feelings, use sounds, and engage with those around them. So what are we doing next? We, as has kind of already been emphasized today, so now we're switching into this longitudinal phase where we need to know kind of the skills that your child continues to show us. So completing those 6-month visits for the next 2 years is going to be very critical. But we are so grateful for all of your participation thus far. None of this obviously would be possible without you, and I think we're entering a pretty exciting phase of just the quantity of data that we have. Again, I talked about kind of developing this roadmap. I think it could be useful for early diagnosis, or maybe somebody can tell me if they feel like that would be useful. If you received an STXBP1 diagnosis, would it be kind of helpful to have something other than like the CDC roadmap of milestones? Would it be useful to have a map kind of from, all of the individuals that we've seen? This is kind of what we would expect. I hope it would be something that would support all of your continued efforts to keep your kids in occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, feeding therapy, play therapy, ABA therapy. There's not a lot of hours in the day, and we know how hard you guys are working kind of for your kids. So maybe if you knew about a roadmap, it would help you kind of focus on certain areas at certain times, or kind of stay persistent if you feel like you've reached a plateau. But I'm happy to hear from you what you all think about that. I already talked about how I think there's a shift, or I think there's an opportunity, I guess I should say, about using milestone achievement to be the comparison for a therapeutic in the future, which I think is pretty exciting. And then the neuropsychologist in me is kind of the last point there, is we know the skills that are harder for our kids to show, and would we be able to leverage kind of therapies specifically at those skills over time. So that's it. Thank you.
Turn the microphone. Oh, perfect. Okay, we have time for one question.
It doesn't have to be a question.
All right. So thank you, Andrea. I think that was really useful, especially for people to see, because I think that, frankly, sometimes taking, seeing the Bailey administered can be frustrating for families to feel like, she can't. But thinking about that in terms of that things develop over time and generating a data set, and then really understanding what a clinical trial and an intervention might do in terms of changing, the milestone achievement. So thank you for putting that in perspective.
I think it can actually be a great comparator.
Thank you.
All right. I have a comment, actually. It's not a question, but I think encouraging some people in the room. So I have a 20-year-old son with STXBP1, and I feel like we did hit a plateau for a while. Andrea knows my son. And I feel like we really did plateau at one point, and we are now seeing some nice gains that he's making again. So I just want to say, don't give up. I think Anna's probably thinking some of the same things, but I just want to say we are having amazing progress with potty training. So can we just give a hands up for that? I mean, that's amazing. So don't give up is what I'm saying. I think to Andrea's point, you may see this plateau, but I feel like there's still potential, to continue to make some progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my daughter's 22, and we've seen more change in her in the last year or two than 20 years before that. So
Wow,
it's delayed. You just don't know how delayed.
Right.
Thank you so much, Andrea. So now we